Washington makes a Slye move. Adam Schefter says he's sorry. A full 7 rounds of mock draft craziness. And we know whose home it'll be when the new stadium gets built. We just don't know where home will be, but we might be getting closer right now on the Locked On Commanders podcast.
Your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome in, Commanders fans, to the Locked On Commanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And we thank you for making us your first listen or view every single day. I'm David Harrison, covering the Commanders for Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation, and my co-host Chris Russell, the Rooster, one half of the Russell and Medhurst show on the Team 980. Find Chris and Pete there Monday through Friday from 3 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time or anytime along with this show on the Audacy app. When we're not there or here, we're on Twitter at DHarrison82, at WrestleMania621, and at LO Commanders. Once again, we thank you for making us your first listener view every single day. Today's episode brought to you by RockAuto.com. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit RockAuto.com and tell them that Locked On sent you. Joey Slye, kicker extraordinaire, the savior of everything the Washington Commanders need for their 2022 Super Bowl contending roster, re-signing with the Washington Commanders on a 2-year deal, Chris, worth up to $5 million. So Washington went from Dustin Hopkins to Chris Blewett. The name still is just perfect, to Joey Slye, and then back to Slye for 2022.
Wait a second. I'm confused. Did you just say 2022 Super Bowl run?
I said what I said, Chris. I said what I said.
You do realize we're talking about the Washington Commanders, right?
Yeah, I said what I said. What I said.
I mean, maybe they should bring back Chris Blewett back, and then they would really have a good chance. Or the other guy, I forget. There were so many place kickers last year that I forgot the names of them all. Yeah. Somehow I remember Blewett because, well, he blew it over and over and over again. I forgot the guy that replaced Joey Slye when Joey Slye got hurt. On a serious note, Dave, this is well, you know, look, this is, of course, an important move, right? Because place kicking is one of those situations where it is not treated with the reverence that other positions are. And we understand why: quarterback, offensive tackle, defensive pass rushing, and corner. We get it. However, I would argue place kicking is the thing that costs more teams wins and losses, maybe more than any other position, including quarterback. And I don't have science or data or number nerd analytics to point that out. I just know by watching 35 plus years of football that it just seems like when you don't have consistency at the place kicking position, you are doom and gloom. Now, Joey Slye, listen, he was good for Washington last year when he came aboard, right? I think he was 6 of 6 in terms of field goals. I wrote the numbers down somewhere, and I'm actually trying to find. I think it was 6 of 6 in field goals. He was with 3 different teams: San Francisco, Houston last year. He was, again, good. I want to see a longer sample size before I go, oh, that problem is solved. Right. I think I have reasonable confidence. I think I saw enough last year to go, okay, you know what? He did have that one extra point blocked against Seattle on the Monday night game. Ironically, the game that he got hurt, that cost him a couple of games. Right. But I think I'm okay with Joey Slye and where they're at the place kicker position. But you might remember this when we first started doing shows last year. At this time, you know, we kept talking if there was one area or one concern. And I mentioned several times, hey, you know, Dustin Hopkins was erratic in 2020. They're not bringing in competition. They didn't do this. They didn't do that. And we saw how it played out. I don't feel that same way. I don't know how you feel. I don't feel that same way right this moment. But it's not like I feel like they've totally solved the position. Does that make sense?
It does. No, I like Joey Slye. I like what he presented. I like what he brought to the field. And listen, I liked what he brought to the field back with the Carolina Panthers. I'm a little surprised, honestly. He didn't stick with the team before he landed in Washington. So I'm happy to see him get the contract with the team. I still want competition. I think every single season you should bring in a camp leg or two regardless. And even if it's just to give Tressway some time off, some snaps off, some reps off during training camp, fine. But bring in another punter or two if you have the space. Bring in another kicker or two if you have the space. And from the kicking standpoint, to your point, if you're capable of costing a team a game, you're also capable of winning a team a game. But with the kicker position, we never give the credit. And I'm just as guilty. I'm not trying to sit up on some high and mighty horse here. Believe me, I'm just as guilty of it. But it really is true. And in a lot of seasons, they're your leading scorer for your football team for a reason. Now they don't get as much credit because they don't move the ball down the field, put it in position, all that stuff. So I get it to a certain extent, but it is an important position. And I think that if I were an NFL GM, again, if I had the roster space and I can make it make sense, I would keep a kicker on my practice squad every single season and have my starter just in case. So at least if I have my starter go out, at least I have a guy I know. I'm not just bringing in some random guy that I'm just meeting and seeing him kick one day and now he's playing a game for me. At least I know you and we've worked together.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like one of those parts of football that, you know how they say, like in other sports and maybe in football, like if you notice the officials, that means they're probably doing a bad job. If you don't notice them, they're probably doing a good job. Well, I almost feel like it's that way for a kicker and a punter. And we know Washington has had, over the last 6-7 years, one of the best punters in the NFL in Tressway. They have not had that same exact stability. They had it for a little while with Dustin Hopkins, but hopefully now they've stumbled across something. David, I found the numbers that I was looking for. Joey last year, total was 9 of 9 on field goals over his 3 teams, 2 of 2 with Houston, 1 of 1 with San Francisco, 6 of 6 with Washington. In Washington, of course, 3 for 3 between 30 and 39, 2 for 2, 40 and 49, 1 for 1 over 50 yards, plus the one missed extra point, which was the one block where he got hurt again against Seattle on Monday night, 9 of 10 there. So that's good. And in terms of touchback percentage, during his time in Washington, he was at 57.1%, 57.1% on 28 kickoffs. I'm sure you'd probably like that to be maybe a little bit higher. Maybe that's something certainly with a normal offseason and maybe, again, not coming back from a leg injury as he did for the last stretch of the season in cold weather. Remember, they were playing the NFC East stretch where they were at Philly, then home for Philly in between a game in Dallas, and then at MetLife. So maybe that all contributed to it. I think Joey Slye will be fine. I feel a little bit better about the place kicking situation going into this year than I did last year. And not to brag that I was right or whatever. I mean, I just never felt good about Dustin Hopkins. You remember that. We had plenty of those conversations, and it was a circus. One thing you cannot, it's like the backup quarterback. It's like you cannot create a circus for yourself, right? You have to have some stability and somebody that just goes out and does their job. I think that's Joey Slye. He played football at Stafford High School in Northern Virginia. So, played at Virginia Tech. So he's from the area. He knows, a little bit about the culture, whatever that means around here. And hey, if they build a new stadium in Dumfries, Virginia, he'll be close to home.
Please don't. Listen, I don't think Washington is making a mistake bringing back Joey Slye, but what we do know is that someone did make a mistake over the weekend. That was Adam Schefter of ESPN issuing an apology for that, and we're gonna talk about that here in a minute. We're also gonna talk about a 7-round mock draft from ESPN's Jordan Reed, and we'll see what he has the Washington Commanders doing. Thanks to our friends over at BetOnline.net, your number one source for all your sports betting stats and information. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of the Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action at BetOnline, where the game starts.
All right, this is the Locked On Commanders podcast. Thanks for being with us, as always, for making us your first listen and watch. If you're watching on YouTube of the day, make sure you're now following the Locked On NFL podcast. Locked On experts covering the biggest stories around the NFL every Monday through Friday in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast. So David mentioned before we went to our first time out that Adam Schefter has issued an apology. And, listen, I know he took a lot of criticism, most of it, I think, rightly so. It was an insensitive tweet. Schefter said on his podcast, the Adam Schefter podcast, quote, "It was insensitive. It was a mistake. And I can assure you It is not my intention. I wish I could have that tweet back. End quote. Of course, he initially put out a tweet saying, quote, Dwayne Haskins, a standout at Ohio State, before struggling to catch on with Washington and Pittsburgh in the NFL. And then he went into the news about his tragic passing before taking that down and putting a different version of it up. David, I'm glad he apologized. It was the right thing to do. Yeah. A lot of people were upset that he didn't apologize initially. Maybe he was told to do so. I don't know exactly what happened, but I'm glad he apologized. I did not take Adam's tweet as harshly as Gil Brandt's criticism, which I thought was completely unfounded. But, Gil apologized immediately. Adam, it took him a couple of days.
Yeah, and then and Adam has a reputation that he's developed. I actually saw a defense of him saying that if Adam Schefter hadn't done so many other insensitive or bad guy things, that this one wouldn't be getting taken as seriously. And I thought that was kind of an ironic attempt to defend somebody as it's almost like saying that, well, if that guy hadn't robbed so many banks in the past, you wouldn't care about the last one that he robbed. Well, that's part of the history, but it is what it is. I think the thing that I didn't like about it the most, and I contributed to it because I was a party to not being appreciative of what Adam did in the line of professionalism, but it put a more negative tone on what happened than needed to be, and I think the focus just needs to stay on the potential that was lost, and then of course those that are left behind that are now dealing with the loss of a loved one. But again, just like we mentioned on yesterday's episode, just like we're going to continue to mention, there are a lot of young men who are getting ready to embark on their NFL dreams the way that Dwayne Haskins was able to do. And in such a short lifespan, he was able to achieve a lot of things and do a lot of things that a lot of people dream of someday doing. So in that light, you can almost be appreciative of what he was able to do in his 24 years of life. And we're going to look now to a full 7-round mock draft from Jordan Reed of ESPN.com. And Chris, Dwayne Haskins was once a first-round draft pick of the football franchise that calls Washington home. And in this mock draft, Drake London, wide receiver out of USC, is also going to be a first-round draft pick of now the Washington Commanders.
Right. Jordan did not do trades as part of, you see a lot of mocks that have trades, no trades. When you're doing a full 7-round draft and projection, I think it's kind of impossible. Maybe somebody does. I'm sure somebody does that. But I was cool with just kind of playing it straight up. Drake London is a guy that I don't think we've really talked about a whole lot, David. So before we go into the rest of the picks, I'm really curious on your perspective because I watched a bunch of video cut-ups on Monday about him. And, I'll be the first one to tell you, I don't watch a ton of Pac-12 football. I just don't. It's usually late at night or whatever.
Right.
But what I did see, and it was about a 5-6 minute video package that somebody had, cut up. What I did see was impressive in terms of body control, hands, contested catches, run after the catch, utilizing his body as a shield. I'm not sure what you think of Drake London he's kind of like one of those guys that everybody kind of feels should be like a top 15, top 20 pick, but isn't getting much love and much credit. Is that sound about right?
Well, he's just not as sexy as a lot of these other wide receivers. You're not going to get, you're not going to find too many highlights of him in the NFL anyway, of burning a guy and having like 20 yards of space. Separation is not going to be his forte. Where he's going to win is exactly like you said, body positioning, strength, the use of his hands, his length, his arms, all of those things. And even some of that yards after catch that he had in college is going to get diminished in the NFL, where defenders and defenses are much more or much better anyway about being around the ball or getting to the ball quickly. So when I look at Drake London, I see a Mike Evans type of wide receiver. And I'm not saying that he's going to be Mike Evans, just that's the style of play that he's going to have. And when you go back to, there were a couple years back, he and Keenan Allen and Chris Godwin kind of had it out on Twitter because Keenan called out both of them saying he was better than both of them. And, look at your separation. Well, again, Mike Evans doesn't win with separation. He wins by boxing you out or being longer than you, taller than you, stronger than you, and out physicaling you to the ball. That's what Drake London is going to do. Now, the concern with Drake London is the ankle injury. And if that's going to do anything to his ability in the National Football League, I don't really think it's going to. But what's held me back from really talking about Drake to Washington at number 11 is that injury, just because I feel like Washington, Ron Rivera, Martin Mayhew, this team is in a position where you have to go with as few risks as possible.
Yeah.
And I know that's ironic when you talk about Kyle Hamilton, who had 2 slow 40 times, post college career. But when you look on the film, you see what you see in Kyle Hamilton, what you know can translate to the NFL. When you look at Drake London, he's going to have to win with physicality going up against much more physical defenders, and you haven't seen that. So that's where it's a little bit hard to fall in love with Drake at number 11. But I wouldn't hate the pick by any means, Chris. The pick I would hate is Sam Howell at number 47, quarterback out of North Carolina. But before I go into that, what do you think about the pick?
Well, I'm fascinated that you say hate because here's the thing. I wouldn't love Sam Howell. I'm not convinced that Sam Howell is anything more than and maybe I'm wrong on this, maybe a smaller version of Taysom Hill, like not a quarterback, if that makes sense. He's more athlete than quarterback. Does that make sense?
Yep.
But at 47, if you told me that I addressed one of my major needs, which I think we would both agree would be wide receiver or some sort of defensive back, cornerback, safety, and of course you could only fill one of them unless you trade and get multiple picks somewhere in between. Assuming that they filled one of those, at 47, I guess I wouldn't hate trying to get the quarterback of the future. Here's my problem. I don't, again, know if Sam Howell is anything more than is more athlete than quarterback. That's what I think he is. And again, I could be wrong on that. You tell me. And then the other part of it is if you go quarterback there, you know what will drive me absolutely bonkers and berserk, David, is if they then turn around and give Carson Wentz a contract extension that they can no longer get out of easily with no dead cap money after 2022, meaning the double dip at this point would be quarterback in round 2 when you have other needs and a deep draft. And then on top of that, giving Carson Wentz a contract extension that was largely unnecessary. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And listen, and I say I hate this pick, and I do. I hate this pick because as far as I'm concerned
just to make sure. Wait. Let me slow down. You think the Commanders are going to win the Super Bowl in 2022 because of Joey Slye?
Because of Joey Slye.
And just to make sure you hate the pick.
But I hate this pick. Listen, what this means is if you're the Washington Commanders, you've spent that second round pick, your third round pick, your next year's third round pick.
That could turn into a second.
For one starting quarterback. Yes. For one starting player.
Right.
And that second player is a backup. He's not a contributor. He's not a special teams player. He is doing nothing. Whoever that number 2 guy is. In 2023, either Sam Howell or Carson Wentz is doing nothing for this team. Because if Sam Howell is starting, Carson Wentz is gone. If Carson Wentz is starting, Sam Howell is sitting on the bench. And I know injuries and all that stuff. You don't draft injury insurance in the second round. If you want insurance, you're looking day 3, maybe a late third round pick at best. You're not drafting insurance in the second round. I get where Jordan's coming from with, hedging your bets on finding a quarterback and all this other stuff. If you thought Sam Howell could be your quarterback of the future, you had no business trading for Carson Wentz in the first place. You find yourself a bridge quarterback like Teddy Bridgewater, Mitchell Trubisky, Jameis Winston when he was still available, and then you pull the trigger on Sam Howell in the draft, and then you allow the bridge to lead to the rookie. You don't trade the draft capital you did on a Carson Wentz to be a bridge quarterback. You trade for him because you believe what Ron Rivera is telling us, that he could be the starting quarterback of the future. Because in trading or in drafting Sam Howell now, you're passing on Lewis Seen, the safety out of Georgia, who goes to the New Orleans Saints at pick 49. You're also passing on David Ojabo, who could be a linebacker or he could be an edge rusher for your defense at pick 50. Christian Harris, a true off-ball linebacker that could join your linebacker crew with Cole Holcomb and with Jamin Davis and make them a lot better at 51. These are all players that are still available at this point in time. And you have Ron Rivera saying that this is the year this team needs to take a turn. And Chris, I'm going to keep coming back to this. You have the easiest schedule in the NFL.
Yeah.
This is the year to go all after skill players. This is that year, because if Carson Wentz can lead a football team to the playoffs in any season, this is it. You have the easiest schedule. That's why I hate the Sam Howell pick. It just does not make sense for what this team says it's trying to do.
No, I think your reasoning makes a lot of sense. All right, coming up next, we'll give you another development in a potential stadium location for the Washington Commanders. But it is time to tell you guys about Rock Auto. David and I are always telling you about how awesome Rock Auto and rockauto.com are with all the big auto parts superstores out there and the car dealerships that are trying to upcharge you and sell you ridiculous parts and prices that you really, quite honestly, don't need. you should take our advice and go to one place and one place only. And here's the best part. You don't even have to go there. It's rockauto.com. You're going to save, 20%, 30%, maybe even 50%, depending on what you need for whatever part you need for your car or truck, whether it's foreign or domestic, new or old, whether it's vanity or a major repair, whatever you need, rockauto.com has it covered for you. Why? They're a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. And again, you don't have to go anywhere outside of your phone or your computer, which everyone can do. Go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in there. How did you hear about us box? So they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices. All the parts your car or truck will ever need at rockauto.com.
Final segment here at the Locked On Commanders podcast. David Harrison and Chris Russell on Twitter at Russellmania621, at DHarrison82, at LO Commanders. Maryland and Prince George's County putting the screws into Dan Snyder, as it were. Chris, some stadium home updates coming out of the great state of Maryland.
Yeah, so this is from the Washington Post, and I'm not sure if I completely understand it, but basically the idea, the genesis as reported, was Maryland is set to apparently borrow as much as $400 to revamp the area around FedEx Field, but it's not designed to keep and build FedEx Field in terms of like a new FedEx Field. It's built or it's designed to revitalize the area, whether the team stays or not.
Right.
Because right now they don't have a deal. So we talked with Eric Flack of WUSA TV. He did a lot of research into a new site in Maryland, in PG County, as part of this Blue Line corridor redevelopment thing. And I'm not trying to get too political, but basically the idea would be to spruce up the area, give Washington what it's looking for in terms of a football village type thing. But more importantly, what PG County and what Maryland is saying, and what Governor Larry Hogan is saying, and this could come law as early as Tuesday or Wednesday, is if Washington does decide to build there, that they are going to invest this money in the surrounding quote unquote infrastructure. If they decide to leave, they're still going to do it anyway because it needs to get done. And oh, by the way, they're going to have public money set aside to bring down the current FedEx Field after the lease expires, David, in 2027. So my question is, and what I don't know the answer to, what I'm still trying to establish is, if they borrow $400 million, say, to spruce up the area around the current FedEx Field and to knock down eventually the current FedEx Field, does that leave money for them to contribute to the actual financing of a new stadium for Dan, who is quickly, as we talked about over the last couple of weeks, losing support in Virginia, where he's gone from $1 billion to apparently like $350 billion or so? And does he get any money, quite honestly, when they've said we're not going to build a football stadium? Does he get any money from PG County, from the state of Maryland? I don't know the answer to that, but it's not looking good right now as far as I can tell.
He's going to get money. I don't know. I don't know that he's going to get $1 billion, but he's going to get money. And this, I mean, honestly, Chris, this kind of falls in line with what we talked about when we first found out that Virginia was probably backing off the $1 billion and dropping their offer down to $350 million. We said it right here in this very show that now Maryland is going to say, okay, well, we'll give you 400 or 450. And then Virginia will come back and say, oh, well, we'll give you 5. And then Maryland will say, okay, we'll give you 6. And then Virginia will say, okay, we'll give you 750. And then Dan Snyder's going to go sold to, whoever, probably the state of Virginia, and we'll make this happen. And then both states will be able to say, hey guys, look, we tried not to give Dan Snyder, who none of you like, as much money, but you have to understand, for the economics and the infrastructure, it was important, And all those things are true, to be quite honest with you. Like, all those things are true. Like, more good will come of this project, whether Virginia or Maryland gives him $700 million, $800 million, $1 billion for the state that it resides in, versus the negative, press from Dan Snyder being involved in the whole thing. So that's something that's important to remember. Here's what I think here's my conspiracy theory about the Prince George's County and the state of Maryland and their proposal. They're already preparing for Washington to leave. That's basically what this tells me, because this $400 million, according again to the Washington Post article, will not cover the hotel that the team wants to have built into this Commander City type of complex, is not going to facilitate a conference center, office space, team offices. And this is the biggest thing, Chris, training center. The days of NFL teams traveling to practice somewhere else or training camp somewhere else and then going to games elsewhere, those days are coming to an end. Every single NFL owner, every single NFL team wants to be able to train, practice, and play in the same facility. You know why? Because it minimizes travel, it minimizes those expenses, that exposure, and those risks, and it maximizes profits because you can put a stands in a practice field and you can sell tickets and you can sell concessions and gear. I watch the Tampa Bay Buccaneers do it every year. They make money hand over fist, and people are literally watching 7-on-7s. That's literally what they're watching, paying more money than some people make in a pay period to do it. That is why they want to do it, Chris. The fact that some of these things are not involved in this new Maryland idea, to me, it's a non-starter for the Washington Commanders for what they want in the future. But what this does for the officials in Maryland is it tells their people, look at all these other things we're going to be able to do if that stadium leaves. Because I'll tell you right now, all that stuff sounds great. It all sounds great. Like as a consolation prize, it sounds really, really good for that area in Maryland, for the people of Maryland. So this is kind of a preamble, a precursor to get people ready for the good that's going to come after the team leaves.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there because we are out of time. Thanks again, Commanders fans, for making the Locked On Commanders podcast your first listen and view of the day. We appreciate you being with us. Now make your second listen, the Locked On NFL Draft podcast. Ryan Tracy, former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker, bringing the NFL Draft to life each and every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and the NFL in terms of front offices. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast. I will be back with a solo episode. Then David will have some voicemails and everything in between. We'll have all sorts of coverage for you, and you never know what's going to happen with this football team. That is for darn sure. If you want to hop in, LockedOnWashingtonCommanders@gmail.com or voicemail 301-615-3577, 301-615-3577. For David Harrison, covering the Washington Commanders for SI.com's Fan Nation, I'm Chris Russell, one half of the Russell and Medhurst Show on the Team 980 and the Audacy app. If you are out and about, please be safe, be kind to one another, please drive safely, and thank you for joining us right here on the Locked On Commanders podcast.